The following story is a translated and adapted conversation, recounting supernatural experiences from around the world. This content is intended for entertainment purposes only. Listen with an open mind and enjoy the thrill of the unknown. The content in this video is purely for entertainment. Viewer discretion is advised. If you are easily frightened, be prepared some stories might just send chills down your spine. If you're ready, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and immerse yourself in the world of the unexplained.
In January 1968, Saigon was a city under siege, caught in the throes of the Tet Offensive, a massive escalation of the Vietnam War. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces launched surprise attacks across South Vietnam, turning urban centers into battlegrounds. The air was thick with gunfire, the streets littered with debris and fear. Into this maelstrom stepped Ellen Carter, a 31-year-old American journalist working for Newsweek, known for her bold dispatches from civil rights protests and Latin American conflicts. Ellen was a trailblazer, challenging the male-dominated world of war journalism with her sharp prose and unflinching lens. Ellen's mission wasn't just professional ambition. Growing up in Chicago, she'd faced skepticism and sexism in her career, driving her to prove her worth in the most dangerous assignments. The Vietnam War was her chance to break barriers, to show that a woman could cover combat as fiercely as any man. But beneath her resolve was a personal wound. Her younger brother, Tommy, had dodged the draft, leaving Ellen to grapple with shame and a need to confront the war he'd fled. Armed with a notebook, a tape recorder, and a Nikon F camera, Ellen arrived in Saigon, ignoring warnings that the city was a death trap. The journey to Saigon was a plunge into disorder. Ellen flew into Tan Son Nhat Air Base, where the air was sharp with jet fuel and the roar of helicopters. She joined a press convoy heading into the city, their jeeps weaving through checkpoints manned by tense South Vietnamese soldiers. The air was humid, sour with smoke and sweat, the horizon lit by the flash of mortar. "Saigon's a powder keg," a grizzled AP reporter muttered. "Tet's torn it apart." Ellen nodded, scribbling the quote, but the words settled in her gut like a warning. Her assignment was to spend a week in Saigon, reporting on the urban combat and its impact on civilians during the Tet Offensive. Ellen's goal was to interview refugees, photograph the chaos, and capture the war's human toll for Newsweek's readers, proving her mettle in the process. She set up in the Caravel Hotel, a once grand relic, now scarred by shelling. Its lobby crowded with journalists and aid workers. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, the windows boarded, the hum of generators constant. That first night, Ellen couldn't sleep. The city screamed gunfire, sirens, the wail of mourners. She sat by a cracked window, reviewing her plan: visit refugee camps, interview survivors, and document the fighting. Saigon's chaos felt alive, and Tommy's absence gnawed at her, a quiet shame she buried. The first 2 days were a whirlwind of violence and grief. Ellen navigated Saigon's shattered streets with a small team: a Newsweek photographer named Jack Riley, a cynical New Yorker with a knack for stark images, a local fixer named Min, a wiry Vietnamese student fluent in English, and a driver named Bo, a former ARVN soldier with haunted eyes. They visited a refugee camp in Chalon, where families huddled in tents, their faces gaunt from hunger. Ellen interviewed a mother who'd lost her son to a Viet Cong ambush, her voice breaking as she spoke. Each story felt like a weight, stirring Ellen's guilt for Tommy's draft dodging, for her own distance from the war's pain. On the second day, Min led them to a Buddhist monk, Thich Quang, who'd sheltered refugees in his temple. He spoke of hungry ghosts haunting Saigon spirits of soldiers and civilians killed in the offensive. seeking the living to ease their torment. "There in the mirrors," he said, his voice low. "They want to be seen." He warned Ellen to avoid reflective surfaces at night, his eyes dark with fear. "They're angry. They'll pull you in." Ellen noted the story, dismissing it as superstition, but Thich Quang's words lingered, stirring unease. Jack scoffed, but his usual bravado faltered, his eyes darting to the temple's shadows. That afternoon, the team photographed a shelled marketplace. Its stalls reduced to splinters, its air heavy with the stench of blood. Ellen's camera captured the chaos-burned bicycles, a child's doll in the dust, a soldier's boot abandoned in a crater. Her tape recorder picked up static laced with Vietnamese whispers, though the market was empty. She shook it off, blaming the equipment, but the hotel felt different, darker, heavier, as if it was watching. Min grew quieter, his fingers tracing a Buddhist amulet, while Bo chain smoked, refusing to linger. Jack's photos were off smudges in the corners, like faces that vanished when checked. The Caravel Hotel was a decaying relic, its corridors dim, its air humid and sour with mold. Ellen's room on the 5th floor was a cramped space with peeling wallpaper, a creaking bed, and a cracked mirror above a chipped dresser. The mirror drew her eye, its surface clouded, its edges jagged, as if it had seen too much. She avoided it, unnerved by Thich Quang's warning. But her reflection seemed off her face paler, her eyes darker, as if someone else was watching. Her recorder ran at night, capturing the city's sounds: gunfire, shouts but also static, laced with whispers in Vietnamese. Unintelligible but urgent, though the room was empty. Ellen's flashlight swept the room, revealing nothing, but the whispers returned, now a soft moan, coming from the mirror's direction. Her skin prickled, a sense of being watched pressing against her. She thought of Tommy, of his letters begging her to understand his fear, and felt a pang of shame, a fear that she was exploiting Saigon's pain to prove herself. The hotel's silence was oppressive, broken only by the creak of floorboards and the distant crack of gunfire. Jack, in the next room, knocked once, his voice low. "You hear that?" Ellen nodded, but the moan faded, leaving a heavier silence. The next day, Ellen interviewed refugees in the hotel's basement, a makeshift shelter crowded with families. Her camera clicked, capturing their despair. But the mirror in the corner showed fleeting glimpses of faces: soldiers with burned skin, civilians with bloodied eyes that vanished when she turned. Min noticed, his amulet clutched tightly, his face pale. "Don't look," he whispered, echoing Thich Quang. Bo stayed upstairs, his chain smoking a nervous tick, while Jack's bravado cracked, his hands trembling as he checked his photos. The hotel felt alive, its walls pulsing, its shadows sharper, as if hiding something. At dusk, Ellen returned to her room, driven by a need to process her notes. The hotel darkened, its power flickering, the generator's hum faltering. She sat at the dresser, avoiding the mirror, her recorder running. The whispers returned, clearer, a chorus in Vietnamese: men, women, children, pleading, cursing, accusing. "You see us." Her pulse raced, her flashlight trembling, its beam catching the mirror. Her reflection flickered, her face morphing for a split second. Soldier, his skin charred, his eyes molten, his mouth a scream. She gasped, backing away, but the image vanished, her own face staring back, pale and wide-eyed. She checked her camera, reviewing recent shots. Her stomach twisted. In one photo, taken in the basement, the mirror showed a burned soldier, his form faint, fraying like smoke, his molten eyes locked on the lens. The soldier's presence was unmistakable, a weight that chilled her blood. Ellen called Jack, who paled, seeing nothing in the photo. "You're tired," he said, but his voice shook, his cynicism gone. Min, summoned from the lobby, clutched his amulet, muttering prayers. Bao refused to enter, his cigarette glowing in the hall, his eyes avoiding the room. The whispers grew louder, now a guttural rasp, coming from the mirror, and the air plunged to freezing, her breath fogging. Ellen stood frozen, driven by a mix of fear and compulsion, her flashlight trembling. The room was a decaying cage, its air icy, almost solid. Her teeth chattered, her fingers numb. The mirror glowed faintly, a sickly light that cast writhing shadows. The whispers became a scream, a piercing cacophony that shook the walls, rattling the dresser. Ellen's mind flooded with images: Saigon burning, soldiers gunned down, civilians crushed in bombings. The visions weren't hers, but they felt real, as if the mirror was forcing her to see the city's pain. She raised her camera, snapping photos, but the scream grew louder, a chorus of voices: soldiers, refugees, children accusing her in Vietnamese. "You profit from us." The mirror rippled, and her reflection morphed fully into the burned soldier, his skin blackened, his eyes molten pools, his mouth a gaping scream. His form was translucent, pulsing with heat, yet the air was freezing. Hands emerged from the mirror, cold and charred, grabbing her wrists with a burning grip that seared without heat. The soldier's voice, a guttural rasp, chanted, "You see us." As more faces pressed against the glass, civilians with bloodied eyes, children with shattered skulls, their screams a deafening storm. Ellen's legs buckled and she fell, her camera slipping from her grip. The soldier's molten eyes bored into her, and she felt a jolt, as if her soul was being peeled open, her guilt for Tommy's cowardice, her shame for building a career on others' suffering, her own ambition clashing with the war's cost. The screams became a cacophony, accusing her. "Why do you watch?" The room shook, objects levitating: pens, papers, a lamp crashing against the walls. The hands pulled harder, dragging Ellen toward the mirror, its surface rippling like water, ready to swallow her. More figures appeared in the glass faint, flickering shapes, their faces melting, their hands reaching. The visions intensified: napalm strikes, massacres, Tommy's face, accusing her of abandoning him. Ellen's scream caught in her throat, her body paralyzed by a terror she'd never known, not in Selma, not in Guatemala, not anywhere. The soldier leaned closer, his molten eyes inches from hers, his scream a knife in her skull, demanding, "Join us." The mirror's surface bulged, the hands tightening, their grip burning her skin. Min's shout broke the spell, his voice raw. "Ellen, smash it." He threw a chair, his amulet dangling, his face pale with terror. Jack lunged, his bravado gone, grabbing a lamp to swing at the mirror. Beau's horn blared from the street, a desperate call. Ellen wrenched free, her wrists raw, and smashed the mirror with her flashlight, the glass shattering into 1,000 shards. The scream peaked, then faded, but the faces lingered in every reflective surface window panes. Metal fixtures, their eyes watching. The room stilled, the air heavy, alive, waiting. Dawn broke over Saigon, pale and smoky, the city's ruins shrouded in haze. The team sat in the hotel lobby, their hands shaking, their eyes avoiding Ellen's. Jack was silent, his camera abandoned, muttering about leaving journalism. Min clutched his amulet, his prayers frantic, his wit replaced by fear. Beau chain-smoked, his eyes red, refusing to speak of the room but admitting he'd heard the scream from the jeep. Ellen checked her camera, but the photos were corrupted streaks of grey, shadowy faces in every frame, and one clear image, the burned soldier. his molten eyes staring, his charred hands reaching, surrounded by glowing orbs. She deleted it, her hands trembling, but the image was seared into her mind, a wound that wouldn't heal. As they drove away, the caravel loomed in the rearview mirror, its windows like eyes tracking their escape. Ellen heard the scream one last time, faint but clear, coming from behind. She didn't look back, afraid of what she'd see. At Tan's Sun Nut, a press chopper evased them to Bangkok, the team silent, their faces a blur. Min, dropping Ellen at the airport, noticed her raw wrists. "You saw them," he said, not a question. Ellen nodded, unable to speak. "They don't leave," Min murmured, echoing Thich Quang's warning. Back in Chicago, Ellen tried to move on. She filed a brief report with Newsweek, describing Saigon's chaos, but omitting the soldier. The words felt empty, inadequate against the horror she'd seen. The hotel clung to her, a shadow that darkened her days. She couldn't sleep without hearing the screams, couldn't look in mirrors without seeing those molten eyes. Her dreams were haunted by the soldier, by the faces, by Tommy's face, accusing her of exploiting pain. Ellen stopped taking war assignments, her ambition shattered by the weight of Saigon. The camera from the hotel sat in a locked box, its lens covered, as if to keep something trapped. She avoided reflective surfaces, covering mirrors, fearing the faces would return. Sometimes, at night, she heard whispers guttural in Vietnamese, coming from her apartment's corners. She never looked, afraid of what she'd see, but the soldier's molten eyes lingered in her mind, a stain that wouldn't fade. A year later, a colleague found a single print from Ellen's Saigon trip, slipped into a folder of unrelated photos. It showed the hotel room empty except for a faint, blurry soldier, his molten eyes staring, his charred hands pressed against the frame. The print was streaked with ash, as if burned from within. Ellen burned it, her hands trembling, but the reflection lingered, a reminder that some mirrors never let go.